Are we ready to go live?
If we can get the studio, where's, are we good? 1, 2,
Hey, Liz.
3, 4.
We don't have 6 in here.
Bakari and Ed, where are they? You're good. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So I want to have introductions, and we'll start with our acting city attorney.
Good evening, Lena James, Deputy City Attorney.
Good evening, Victoria Wallington, serving at large.
Good evening, Luana Mayfield, Councilmember at Large.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Vi Lyles, Mayor.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, District 4.
Ariel Smith, Lead City Clerk.
All right. So today, I did not have a chance to join everyone in the committee, but I did watch all of the committee sessions on YouTube. I hope many of the people in this community will recognize that tonight we're going to have discussions that were done this afternoon and today with the Charlotte City Council committees. And we want to have what they have done as an output or an information item so that we can make sure that everybody understands what each other is doing. So today, I just still want to remind people that you can watch us on the government channel and the city's Facebook page and our YouTube channel, which is what I did today for most of this. We also have a report after the committee discussions from the airport, and we'll be doing that. And then by that time, if there's no closed session tonight, we will be ready to have adjournment. So with that, I'm going to begin with our transportation. Well, where did he go? Where does Ed go? Let's start. If it's not transportation, then we'll go ahead and go to our Committee on Economic Development. Oh, here he is. Thank you. All right, Mr. Driggs.
Mind if I go next? I need to
Okay.
compose myself first.
I think it's Mr. Bakari could do this next on our Committee on Economic Development.
Sure, glad to do it. Mr. Driggs, the co-chair, can chime in, but I'll hit the high points. We discussed the arts funding strategy, which was referred to committee. And while we didn't get into the weeds of what the ultimate strategy should be, we took a deep dive look at the hospitality funds, at the affordability going forward of those funds for the long term, and we determined as a group to take a vote and the position on that one, that while the arts discussion, there's more to be had and more needed, we were going to recommend. Did we vote on that?
Yes.
We did vote on that. Recommend not to consider those funds to be utilized for it. You can add to that if you'd like.
So we did receive a detailed presentation on the anticipated uses of hospitality funds and their intended uses, their allowed uses, and I think the upshot was that the hospitality business is kind of a standalone sector. The industry incurs those costs through the tax and delivers great value with their use of the proceeds. So I think the view that I expressed and I think was shared was that we should use our general fund to fund the arts. One critical point that was made was the volatility of hospitality funding is such that you can have a steep drop-off, as we experienced during the recession. It's not the most reliable source of continuing funding for the arts. So the unanimous conclusion of the committee was that we should continue to fund the arts from the general fund.
And Mr. Driggs, I think that will come up as the manager's preparing the new budget and as well as what we'll be talking about at our strategic retreat for 2025. Is that
Right. I think the
accurate?
committee dealt with the referral on the question of the accessing hospitality funds, and having heard a detailed explanation, it's the recommendation of the committee that we not do that, that we go with the general fund.
All right. Thank you very much.
Number 2 is Providence Road.
Mr. Bakari, you want to take jobs and economic development?
That's yours.
Yeah, I mean, same committee, and there were 2 other topics. One was a good but brief one with the chair of the business, what's the business committee? The committee that we have?
Business
Nope.
Advisory
The Business Advisory Committee, I served on it, can't remember the name.
I think you served a very long time.
I
You were-
did, yeah, obviously.
It gets worse and
It's long
worse as you
ago.
get older.
I'm getting older.
Okay.
But it's always good to have those updates, and they are interested in some particular small business related initiatives that, once again, we will work with staff to try to align. And then finally, the more complicated one, which happens also reside in my district, the 3 rezonings that are happening simultaneously this month on Providence with the 3 petitioners that have brought it forward. This was to hear about the TIG, the Tax Increment Grant request, that is also simultaneously running through the Economic Development Committees of the city and the county. We went through all the details from staff. Our premise at that point was, overall, it looks like a fair to good deal as it stands to move forward into full council consideration in the next business meeting, or the next business meeting. But there are ongoing kind of negotiations and efforts to figure out how to take something from good to great. And that work is underway in parallel with it coming towards us. So that is happening in parallel with the county's work, parallel with the rezoning. So certainly one of the more complicated items, but also one of the more transformational.
That's a great way of looking at it. It is going to be
So we
tough.
voted on the TIG to move it forward.
Yes,
Sorry, just to
move it
clarify.
forward. So we have a vote to move that forward. And as you said, Mr. Bakari, transformational, but really making a big difference in terms of what I saw, not just the housing that we would have, that Enlivian has, but housing that may be marketable for many, many people in this community. So exciting to hear about that.
Mayor, if I could just note on that, these proposals contemplate the creation of about 1,800 residential units, and there are 400 to 500 more in the Horizon piece that's also part of the overall scheme. And in my mind, this is the most powerful way that we can pursue our UDO goals. We're not going to be able to use city money or ordinances to create the kind of housing. We need to see development like this in order to increase the supply and address the cost of housing. Just want to mention that.
I just imagine that it doesn't need to happen in Mr. Bakari's district the next time. Ms. Mayfield. Ms. Mayfield.
Conversation on this now?
I think it's done. The report has been poured out, has been good, but I also heard you talk about this this afternoon and from the housing perspective.
Thank
So
you,
please.
Madam Mayor. So I just want us to take into consideration when we're talking about TIG, especially since there's going to be a request for us to actually vote on this next Monday. There were a few questions that I had for staff that I would like to get a response to. One, 15 years is not a long period of time. I've shared concerns that I have on short periods of time, even though I appreciate the fact that there is a housing affordability component. I didn't feel like that was necessarily a selling point for the request of this TIG. I want to know from staff, where are we currently? How many TIGs do we have out there leading up to 2039 that will be expiring by that time period? What is that financial impact, since the TIG is to be able to pay a reduced amount? We are continuously growing. I am concerned that financially we may run into a wall sooner rather than later. I gave the example earlier that from 2011 to 2019 was only 8 years. But in that 8 short period, we saw over 200% increase in the cost of housing here in the city. But it was not just housing, the cost of doing business, period. Small businesses, others that have closed their doors or not ever had the chance to really get started without having additional funding support. So I want to get an idea of exactly where are we on TIGs that are outstanding? What is the anticipated dollar amount and revenue that we're not receiving? And after those TIGs end, what is the actual, if we've had any, that have completed within this last 15 years what is now the revenue we're receiving, or are we seeing that these companies, before the TIG is over or near the end of the TIG, it transitions to something else, just with the model of how we utilize it? So I have a concern that when we're talking about addressing our housing needs, there's a need. We have very creative and strategic ways to address that need. I want to make sure we're not setting ourselves up in the long run with looking at a short-sighted goal of saying this is a great thing, but then if the anticipated growth of the city continues on this path, we are in a much more stringent financial position with trying to address what's happening. So for me, that housing piece was not something that is a selling point. Also, for me, the selling point is not what they're giving to the county. That $500,000 to go towards our housing and $1 million going towards parks, our deficit is still our deficit. And our deficit of 35,000 plus units has been there for a while, even though we have a number of new units that are out there. I just think there's other opportunities.
So, Mr. Bakari?
Yeah, I think the councilwoman's raised some valid questions that I think she should, and we should all be able to look at the look back on the TIG's, different TIG's performance over the last 15 years. I would just note for clarity on this, there's the rezoning thing, which we're still working through and handling. We are just focused on the TIG. And number two, the TIG is an instrument that can't be directly correlated to one aspect of this. So while there is what we will refer to as naturally built affordable housing as part of this without subsidy, while there's park space and greenways, while there's a whole bunch of different things, the TIG more directly aligns with the spend that's going to be on the transportation infrastructure. But you have to step back and look at the entire deal as it relates to all the benefits as to why you'd make it. So not saying that the questions aren't good ones, just it's going to be super hard for someone to align TIGs to the affordable housing components of this deal or others. So I just want to kind of clarify that.
Okay, so I think, Mr. Jones, you understand the request is on the TIGs. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to know when full council will get a presentation on this deal.
I believe it's Monday.
Monday, okay.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Okay. So we'll now go to.
I'm ready if you want me to. I'm ready now. if
Okay,
you want.
we'll go back to transportation. Mr. Driggs.
Okay, so the members of the committee are myself, Ms. Molina, Mr. Graham, Ms. Johnson, and Ms. Watlington. We discussed, in the end, 2 items today. Didn't really get a chance to deal with our third agenda item in detail. One was a CATS update. A lot of that was a briefing on the FTA's review of CATS, which identified 8 areas of sort of need for attention. All of these were areas that we knew about as a result of the process we've been through for the last couple of years. So we feel comfortable that we are on track to deal with things that the FTA brought to our attention. They also included in their remarks some favorable comments about the management and operation of CATS. So I feel that that was, in general, a very benign report. It came about because we asked for a special review from the FTA on finance and operations back when the trouble started a couple of years ago. And we have now had the benefit of their scrutiny as well as the work that was done by the management consultants. So my own view is that we have a good handle now on the situation at CATS, that it is normalized. There is some work left to be done. And there is always the aspiration, as Mr. Graham pointed out, to go from good to excellent. But I believe that we can treat the referral to this committee about CATS as having been discharged, and that furthermore, the working group that was established as kind of a SWAT team to work on the issues there has fulfilled its purpose. And in response to Ms. Johnson's comments, the CATS will continue to be subject to the oversight of the Council, of the Transportation Committee, and the MTC So, and we have a lot of work to do in the coming year on the update of the 2030 plan to align it with the prospect of getting a sales tax passed and having revenue for more projects. So there's going to be a lot of work around CATS, but I do feel that the situation has been stabilized enough that we do not have to have that extraordinary kind of crisis mode oversight.
Thank you, Mr. Driggs, for acknowledging that we did have the
Ms. Johnson has a comment
issue,
there.
and we're not, but I also wanted to let you know that the MTC in its meeting also found that this was, as Mr. Driggs said, it was an issue that has been resolved, and now I think the issue is how do we make sure that we can keep people in places where we can have bus service and have places where people can get to work and be in, live more comfortably instead of it just being, I've got to ride the bus and we need to begin to think about what does it really mean to ride in the bus and how can we make it a better system for all of us with locations as well as how we make sure that work is available for other people. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the things that I did say during the meeting is this city and city staff does a wonderful job of strategic planning and having that vision. But I feel it's important that we manage the change. There's a difference between leadership and management, and I really think we need to tighten up on our management of all of the impact, the cumulative impact, and the changes. They're, almost like we need to, when we talk about growth versus infrastructure, that's managing versus leading. So I was fortunate, we did not vote on disbanding the working team, so that wasn't a vote. So that is something Mr. Driggs mentioned, but it wasn't an action of the committee, because I think that there's still room to continue to have this spotlight on CATS. The reason that the working group was formed was because of a crisis that was uncovered. So I think because what gets measured gets done, I think that it's appropriate that we keep our foot on the pedal. One of the comments during the meeting was there was this particular route that will never run on time. Well, that's not acceptable. So I think that we need to continue to work on those groups, those issues. Ms. Mayfield brought up an excellent point about safety. She'll probably elaborate, but safety on the trains, on the buses, at the stops. So I don't think it's appropriate for us to disband the team or the emphasis and attention on CATS. We still don't even have a permanent executive director. We're still in interim. We're still in a transition. So I would not have supported disbanding the team, but again, we did not vote on that as a committee. It is something that Mr. Driggs brought up, but it was not a formal action. Thank you.
I thank you for your comments. Those were good comments. I think that we really do have to look at this as a way that we do want safety. We do want to be on time. But I also think that you can have so many people overseeing. The committee was an ad hoc committee. And now we have a committee made up of the MTC where the executive director, that's even temporary right now, he is responsible for reporting to the MTC. And then with the MTC, with all the representation in the county, it's not getting away from, it's just a matter of making sure that the people at the MTC have the opportunity to do exactly as the review is stated, that we want to make sure that our bus system works for everyone. So with that, I think if we can have, I think my suggestion would be to provide your comments to the MTC at the next meeting, which is, I think, next couple of weeks, and see where they sit, and we can have a recommendation from them if we need to do something differently. All right?
I have a couple more.
I know
Okay,
you want to
yeah.
have a couple more, so transportation, right?
Yes.
So go ahead, and yours, was it related to? Transportation. Okay.
So the second item we talked about, there was some consternation at our zoning meeting about a text amendment, you may recall, and it was a couple of pages of little text amendments, and we weren't quite sure what it all amounted to. So we had a presentation from staff today explaining that these amendments are essentially administrative and operational in nature. They're intended to align the implementation of the UDO better with the 2040 plan and with our goals. They don't constitute a departure or any new policy, and they're just trying to remove some kinks that have come to light by virtue of our experience with the UDO up until now. They think it's going to be the last text amendment that is needed. So the committee agreed unanimously to recommend to the full council that we do go ahead and adopt those, approve those. I think some of the concern that people had was it said they can do such and such under certain conditions. And the thing was, you didn't know what the conditions were, so therefore it was hard to know what it meant. I asked the staff to provide us an assessment of the overall impact. Like, is this going to make a huge difference? How many different zonings will now be different because of these text amendments? But my own conclusion, and I think that of the committee, was that these were indeed in the realm of operational and administrative proper text amendments, because they then went on to talk about proposed residential refinement. And this would be a policy initiative talking about modifying some of the permissions for housing types in districts other than N1 to accommodate the purpose of those districts and allow certain types of construction of residential property within them. That's something that they're working on. So we'll hear more about it, not final yet. But they just gave us an indication that that's what they were looking at, and I think that's very useful because, as I mentioned before, we need to do everything we can to maximize the opportunities for residential development. Increasing the supply of housing is the strongest thing that we can do to address the cost of housing. And then the last item on our agenda was a community area planning update. As it turned out, we ran out of time, so we got a very brief update on that. And I will just mention that there was a description of what these community area plans are. We've heard that before. I hope everybody understands what that's about. And what we were told in the meeting was the work that's being done, the schedule, the outreach to the community, and the general nature of what is expected to come out of that. And there is a document that they showed us, the name of which I don't have right here. But anyway, there is a document that actually talks about the community area plans and that process. But again, no action on that in any case.
And that is our blueprint for infrastructure? Is that am I in the right place?
The community area plans?
Community area plans?
Yeah, the plans in general, there are
Okay.
14 of them, right? And they are intended to sort of adapt and customize the UDO to the circumstances of each of those 14 areas.
Okay.
They don't modify the language of the UDO. They will affect an update to the policy map that is intended to be adopted at the same time so that it conforms better to the circumstances. And they will express goals that we have for development in those 14 areas. I mentioned to them that I wanted them to be sure that there was a lot of involvement by any council person who's affected in any of the 14 areas so that we get the benefit of that input.
I think almost every council member will have several areas to
Well, if
have
there are
input.
14
so
of them,
we-
yeah,
14 of them,
probably.
so, and I guess, Mr. Driggs, do you expect this to come back in December or January? What's your thinking? What's the committee's thinking?
I honestly can't. On the community area planning process, no, we had a timeline that goes out a little further than that, and I don't know if I have that.
All right, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure we didn't put it on agenda really fast. Okay,
I don't believe that's not next week or anything.
okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So back to the conversation around cats, I just wanted to make sure that all of my colleagues knew the direction that I was asking a question in committee earlier. One, I think transportation, CATS also needs to be presenting to Housing and Neighborhood Services as we keep talking about access to housing, access to workforce, access to transportation. I have asked for Mr. Cagle and the team to really look at how we're utilizing our technology. So I actually forwarded an email to Mr. Cagle probably about 10, 15 minutes ago from a constituent. The routes that they need, the two different buses that they need to take, have the exact same time. We know that we have the CATS app. We also know the technology of where people are starting, what they're putting into the app, where they need to get to. So if we're looking at this map and we're seeing vehicle A, and we know the route that it's going, just like when you're on the trains, and you know all the connectings, we have to do a better job of making sure that that second vehicle is actually connecting and that we're not doing this, and then you're waiting 45 minutes. It does not make sense when our airport is growing at the level it's growing, and eventually, probably sooner rather than later, it will be a 24-hour airport, that if you live in Steel Creek, it takes you 2.5 hours to get to work at the airport. If you live out on the east side, it takes you 2.5 plus hours one way. That's 5 hours a day you're spending just on transportation. And the airport, you need to be there at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning at sometimes, and you're getting off late at night, depending on what shift you're working. So if we're talking about, we are a small town that wants to be a big city. We're having big city discussions. We need to make sure that our transportation is aligned with our workforce. We know where the people are. I don't know if we're necessarily utilizing the technology that we have accessible, or if we just made a major investment recently on technology. How are we using AI? How are we looking at our transportation needs and ensuring? And I also asked Mr. Cagle in his presentation, are we looking at crime and safety? How are we utilizing AI again? CMPD showing up after the fact, that's the effect. We can probably capture that cost. We have had May, August, September, November, and last night, someone whose life has ended at our CATS station. We can't say that we want quality, safe housing options along a rail line if we're not utilizing the technology that we have to actually monitor our rail lines to make sure that they're safe. So we're telling people to go out and use this public transportation system, but we're not having the real conversations that we need to have regarding public safety and making sure that people are, to the best of our ability, government cannot do everything, but to the best of our ability, that people are safe when they are utilizing our public transportation, whether it's to get to school, to work, or even to one of the many events that we have uptown. So I would have liked to have heard, what does that conversation look like? And the conversation can't be, well, we're partnering with CMPD, because I promise you, I can give you pictures from where I have been at the rail station, and I have seen CMPD officers sitting in their vehicle, but not actually patrolling. I don't know if they're supposed to be patrolling, but we have cameras, we have technology. We could be utilizing that more. Everybody got a Ring camera, simply say some type of security measure, most people at their home. We can be utilizing that better to create more safety and create the feeling of safety. Because imagine if you have that 311 operator or that CATS operator that comes over the speaker systems that we already have installed, over that speaker system, to let it be known that this station is monitored, and that be for all our stations.
Again, this is an opportunity. The CATS MTC meeting included the requirements for the safety plan, and you're right, CMPD does not actually act on this because they have an additional set of people that they contract with to do this, but I think it's a timely that you know that you want to try something different. I think on safety, there is a safety technology group within the organization that could do this. But I think it's really most important that what makes people feel safe is being around a lot of people. And I think that what you've asked for is to say, how do we make sure that we can keep people from being on the side of the road or in the busway and not be on the bus in a way that we can create and make sure that they feel safe about it. So, Mr. Cagle will have a lot of work to do.
That, and just for clarification, the safety and technology team, this part of safety is not, the impression I received, that is not the target. The target is the safety on the actual tracks, them not leaving. I am talking about using the technology that we already have at our stations, through the boxes, through the cameras, to do better monitoring and create not just the appearance, but to create that truly safe environment.
That is included in the document that they just presented, and it is an important area, and they have a whole team working on it. So David Mokshowicz, I believe, I think you'll and see that Mr. Cagle and he will be able to give you some information, and you'll be able to give them this information. I think it'll work really well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. All right, Mr.
I
Driggs.
just wanted to add,
I'm
today's
sorry,
conversation was about winding down the special effort that was initiated as a result of the problems with cats. It doesn't mean to minimize at all the need to continue to strive to make cats better and safer. And in fact, we are going to embark on a 6-month at least extensive planning process to revamp our 2030 plan and align it with the prospect that we hope we will have as a result of a referendum for a sales tax in November that would provide funding. And among other things, based on the expected proceeds from a sales tax, we would have about $4 billion to invest in buses and similar non-rail type of public transportation. And I'm sure there will be a very robust and fundamental conversation, because I agree with Ms. Mayfield. I think housing and transportation go hand in hand. You know, I mean, it's a question of how long does it take to get from this place to that place. So no question about that. I think we will have abundant opportunities to deal with it. The main point was that the special arrangements we had because of the problems of cats are not needed anymore. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Molina? I'm sorry.
Do you want to go? Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll be brief. I think in the meeting, Mr. Cagle, he hit on a lot of very important points. I think one of the bigger ones that I saw that he hit on was exactly what we're talking about, is our bus ridership, right? More than 60% of our users ride buses, which means that particular conversation takes precedent, whether we're talking about safety or transporting our community members in a reliable way. And I like some of the updates that he shared with the body for an asset management system that would kind of be subsequent to the ERP system. So they're already creating efficiencies that would make us, from an information and technology perspective, they're actually ahead of where we are as far as the citywide timeline. And so, you know, I thought that was outstanding, very commendable to say that, you know, in such a short time, having Brent on board, that he's taken that initiative, that we've seen these types of, you know, clear and concise milestones, but then taking it a bit further is that he's actually already, with anticipation of our, you know, enterprise resource planning system, he's actually creating a resource that would, you know, work in alignment with what resources we would have within CATS. He also broke down how they've decentralized the operations of the CAT system, which would work with an asset management system, because they don't have to be centralized in one place then. Using information and technology, we could actually, you know, communicate within, you know, and know what resources we have to deploy. And so I heard good things from him today, and I know that there's work to do, and I don't want to, you know, de-emphasize or not place emphasis on any of the other areas of opportunity that we have. But I just want to say that I was very encouraged by those updates that we had today, and some of the milestones that they've completed in the department. And Mr. Manager, I don't know what conversations you've had with Mr. Cagle, and I don't know if he likes us enough to stay, but I do think that he's done an excellent job in the amount of time that he's been tasked with this very difficult challenge of putting us back on track with CAT. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say again that I think the loss of life and the crime and the ridership are a crisis. So if you're disbanding the group, then that would be, it's not with full council support. I'm just opposed to that. And another thing I wanted to address is Mr. Driggs mentioned that there was unanimous support of recommending the UDO. There was not a vote on that. As a matter of fact, when I asked a question, I was told not to ask the question. It wasn't related. So there wasn't a unanimous vote for the moving forward with the UDO. I had a lot more questions,
The
and
text amendments, do you mean?
we were rushed with our agenda. So I don't think that there was, again, enough time for council to absorb the information to make that recommendation. Lastly, the community area planning, I wanted some more information on that. I know we didn't, there were some dates, and Mr. Jones, maybe you can answer the question as far as the community area planning. We did get an overview, and she said that the period for, I think, community input was closed, but there would be opportunities for questions. Large precincts to have this information, and they're not getting the information until after the comment period, I think, is closed. So can you tell me what the time frame is, what's closed and what's going on to happen in January, or where we are in the community area planning phase?
Sure, Councilmember Johnson, and if I'm not correct, somebody will chime in. The group that I think you're referring to, staff met with them last month and are willing to meet with them again in January, is my understanding.
I talked to the chair today, and
Okay.
yeah, she said their presentation's in January.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. It's different than what staff said.
So
to
can you
me.
tell me the difference in, like, what's expired, or what deadline what deadline passed?
Sure, so I think Allison is here. Let's just have Allison come in, and I
Okay,
think she
thank
can
you.
address your questions directly.
While we wait, could I comment, Madam Mayor? You asked the question about the community area plan. The intention is that there will be a presentation to the full council on January 25th, and the goal is to release a draft in March 25th. March 25 and January 25. But anyway, it's going to happen in January and March. I wanted to mention, too, in our committee meeting today, to clarify what happened, we were discussing the text amendments and whether they were appropriate or not. The conversation started to branch into policy questions that I didn't feel were within the scope of that topic. So that was why I reined in. And then I did suggest that even though it was an information item, that without objection, I would like to be able to report to the council that the committee felt it was okay to go ahead with those. And I didn't hear an objection. So that's what happened.
Okay. Let's go.
Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council. I'm going to ask Kathy to answer the question. Kathy Cornett leads the community area planning process and has some of the details that you were just discussing. So, Kathy.
Okay, Kathy.
Good evening. In relation to the District 4 meeting, so a member of our staff, Catherine Mahoney, who is the project manager actually for community area plans, spent some time on the phone walking, I believe it was the coalition president or director, through the area, through the website and where all the information can be found. And that was when the conversation happened where she invited us to the January 8th district meeting. So we are happy to have other discussions. I believe the last name was Evans. We're happy to have other discussions with anyone that needs help. And the closing of, it was just the web tool which closed phase 3 of the process. So it's actually a 5-phase process. Phase 1, kind of setting the stage. Phase 2 focused on the policy map. And phase 3 focused on projects and programs. Phase 4 is now assembling the document, and then it goes into review and adoption. But throughout the entire process, there's always open for comment, and we're happy to meet with anyone. All of the information is still on the website, so happy to do any of that.
When did Phase 3 close?
Phase 3, so the last Phase 3 meeting was November 15th, and the web tool closed the 29th.
So November 29th. So the person would have met with the D4 coalition prior to November 29th.
Yes, it was.
What I was saying is they were unaware that there was, that there would be a difference between the meeting in November and meeting in January. So that's the kind of information that's helpful to residents. You know, they don't have the technical knowledge or those timeframes, so we rely on the experts for guidance, and that wasn't given. And what I'm afraid of, even with the UDO, you know, we were told, well, this phase is finished and it will be open for comment, and it just kept moving forward, and members didn't feel like they were able to give that input. And this is a specific example because I mentioned D4 Coalition months ago. So it's concerning to me that we don't have the input from the coalition when it represents District 4, when District 4 is changing so much. I would have hoped that the coalition's input was taken, or the opportunity to be given. So I don't know. So what I don't want to see is this draft, and then they have a comment. That wasn't their desire either.
Right.
So maybe we can, I don't know if there's an opportunity to extend that deadline or something, because, I mean, I mentioned D4 Coalition at the beginning presentation of this. So it's concerning that this is scheduled after the Phase 3 period is closed.
I understand. We can certainly look at that, and we're happy to follow up with the leader that we spoke with of the D4 Coalition and make sure that questions were answered, see if they were perhaps able to attend the workshop, and we can go from there. We're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so let's move on to the Housing and Safety Committee. I think they were just so glad that they were kicking the ball through the goal lines about 20 times, so.
Well, because I know we have a presentation, we'll keep this extremely brief. So I'm just going to ask Sean to just come up real quick, share real briefly the highlights from our year in review, which is what we spent our time on, and then a couple of items that were lifted up as potential topics for next year.
Thanks, Chair Watlington. I'll be exceptionally brief. As Chair Watlington mentioned, the committee did a quick review, the year in review. There were a number of meaty referrals that went through the Housing, Safety, and Community Committee this year, starting the year with a review of city ordinances, where Council ultimately restored the criminal penalty option for a handful of ordinances. In tandem with that, there were a number of non-enforcement strategies that were launched earlier in the year, such as city investment in street outreach focused on the uptown area. Before the summer break, there was a focus on the community safety framework, which was the youth crime referral that came out of your January of 2024 strategy retreat. The first investment associated with the youth crime referral was a $2.5 million council authorized support for the Katie Blessing Center, which will be a transformational, one-of-a-kind pediatric behavioral health care facility on the east side of town. And then the committee rounded out the year with a discussion around the affordable housing funding policy in tandem with the $100 million bond that was passed by voters. Now this council has a very definitive point of view on policy focus associated with affordable housing investments and, in fact, with explicit investment categories. Also, a quick conversation on a number of things that weren't brought through as a referral, but the committee had a chance to and will continue to shape going forward, including the faith-based housing initiative. So what are the things the city can do to help be a catalyst for houses of worship that have an interest in affordable housing but maybe aren't sure where to start? So there are a number of things that will be done, including providing technical assistance, et cetera, in order to help activate on some of those ideas. And then a Home for All, which is the public-private partnership that the United Way is leading, focused on both housing and homelessness, continues. And to the extent there are funding opportunities associated with a Home for All, those will come through for full council deliberation before there's anything put on for an action review. Most of the conversation was really focused on the look ahead in calendar year 2025, with the committee just wanting to take a moment before the end of the calendar year to reflect on things that could inform the end of January strategy retreat conversation, and what are the types of things that this committee feels most passionate about. There were a few ideas that came up in conversation today. I'll mention three of them in particular. One was, as we think about leveraging new channels and communication methods with our stakeholders, are there things that we should be thinking of differently going forward to better ensure we're getting the right kind of information to the right stakeholders at the right time? A little bit of, the second item wasn't really so much policy driven, but more of a reminder, given that we have many funding pathways for our affordable housing resources, we have more resources available than we've ever had before. Let's ensure that we're building equity into those funding pathways to the fullest extent possible. And then third, there seemed to be strong consensus across committee members that there could be an opportunity to build on some good things that are already being done here in Charlotte, with City of Charlotte involvement, for example, related to the intersection point between sustainability, affordable housing, and residential energy usage. So a lot of times when we've talked about cost-burdened households, we'll typically focus on rent and mortgage, and that's clearly the biggest piece. But energy costs can be large as well. So are there opportunities for the city to be a catalyst to help residential homeowners be more energy efficient, leverage renewable energy technologies, et cetera? So that could be something that council members from the committee want to focus on at the strategy retreat at the end of January. Those were the highlights.
Thank you so much, Sean. Question?
Thank you. Trying to come up with something very different and innovative. So I am going to be my chair's cheerleader and thank Sean and Rebecca and the entire team because they are doing amazing work within Housing and Neighborhood Services and Community Safety. And again, we see how it all committees, transportation, economic development, workforce, are all tied into what we are also creating within housing.
Okay, thank you. It's always helpful to brag. So those, I think we have our last committee, the BG, oh, I'm sorry, no, Madam Mayor. No, geez, give me a break here. And I was just saying, we were going to go with BGI, but Ms. Molina wants to say something.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just really quickly, did you highlight the faith in housing? Did a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, we got a long night.
I know.
Let's, y'all can pat each other on the back tomorrow, after this is over. That's it. That's right, you're a little bit tall for me, I'm telling you. Yeah. I know, okay. All right, so BGI, Mr. Bakari is going to give us a summary.
Yes, thank you. I'll finish this up briefly for us. A lot of people said it was one of the greatest run meetings they've ever seen. I read it on the internet. I don't know.
Glasses or not?
So we had three items. I think all three are items this council will be interested in a night like this. We got a preview from the manager of the annual strategy meeting. He talked about the potential location. And again, these were ingredients. He was very conscious not to get ahead of any of us and our ideas of what we'd like, but brought forth the Asheville concept to support that part of the state, obviously, and there are other reasons we should be there from a strategic perspective, but obviously none more relevant and timely than the crisis that they have been going through. Focused in on key areas of discussion of mobility, small business, workforce development. That's when the committee conversation came up. It was talked about to make sure that council is able to truly lead a lot of the conversation, set the strategy tone, not just necessarily be presented to. I think we've heard that theme before. As external speakers are identified, consider leaders to get into the weeds of it, which I was in favor of. So there'll be more to come on that, but that was the initial kind of unveiling of that. We got our FY24 external audit presentation by Cherry Becker. And I think the punchline is we got a clean audit. There was an internal control deficiency related to a $5.5 million FEMA accounting item of a grant that we got there. But we asked a bunch of questions and felt that it has been remediated and there won't be any ongoing issues that we'll experience from that. And then finally, the 2025 legislative agendas were discussed. Dana Fenton brought through the update we all got the last time we were together. And we went through, Council Member Johnson's recommendation was completely thrown out. We did not focus on that at all. I'm just kidding. That was the
other meeting.
Oh, sorry, I misread my notes here. That was actually the one change we made. We made a slight wording clarification around the immigration-related language to point specifically at the 2019 work that we had all done and put together, not whatever the federal government comes up with on that front, which I think balanced the comments we heard from her last week. And then while we discussed in depth around some of the public safety concerns that Councilmember Watlington brought up, we had a good deeper dive update onto some of the safety issues, particularly around arcades. And we were pretty satisfied that what's going on in Raleigh paired with what the abilities we have here, those were solved for. And we all agreed that some elements of the density of establishments serving beer and wine and other related issues there is a relevant but complex topic, and one that perhaps as the takeaway, not to change the legislative agenda now, but have that deeper conversation, if it's the council's will, in the retreat, so that we could get deeper into it. So, like I said, a lot of people online, everywhere, saying it was an amazing meeting. I don't know if I agree, but it was definitely well run.
I read about that. I heard about it.
Yeah, Observer, CBJ, everyone's talking about it.
I think I saw some gold stars labeled for that. Absolutely.
We should make him chairman of something else.
I know.
You can pat yourself on the back
City.
later.
All right, so Mr. Driggs.
I would just like, as the numbers geek on council, to highlight the fact we got a clean audit. Everybody appreciate that, all right? It's a big deal. A huge amount of work went into it. Congratulations to the finance staff and the manager. It's not something you take for granted.
Group meetings dealing with the Part 150 noise. But we also thought it was very important to have a discussion tonight as a part of the committee day. So I'd like to turn this over to our CEO of the airport, Haley Gentry, and she will walk us through what tonight will look like.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mr. Manager, and council members. Good to be with you this evening. My name is Haley Gentry, and I have with me, I'd be remiss to not introduce our staff, but I have Ted Kaplan, Chief Business and Innovation Officer, Jack Christine, Chief Infrastructure Officer, Katie McCoy, raise your hand, Katie, Strategy Director, and Stuart Hare, Community and Economic Affairs Director. Excuse me, we just changed the name of his team, so I apologize. And all things Team Airport, we also have a representative from American Airlines, who you know very well, Tracy Montross. We're going to get started. I'll try to be brief. In the interest of time, I want to allow you time to ask questions if needed, but I also know that some of you have been gracious with your time and have shared that with us previously to discuss this, so bear with me. Where did it go, Amanda? Oh, could have been a snake, it would have been me. Okay. I do airports, not tech, so. Okay, we'll get started. We're going to start with a brief overview of what the Part 150 is and is not. We will recap the timeline as well. Community involvement will be touched upon, and then we'll get into the draft recommendations. So what is a Part 150? The Part 150 is the mechanism with which the FAA uses to guide and control planning for noise compatibility in and around airports. So that's pretty straightforward, but you would be surprised how a lot of the community, when we start to engage in these conversations, doesn't understand that this has a specific focus and is limited to specifically what we just cited. We started our first program in 1987 at the airport, and the program is, using the FAA's words, a goal of the program is to develop a balanced and cost-effective plan for reducing current noise impacts. So what does the Part 150 include? It has 3 elements: noise exposure maps, noise compatibility program, and public involvement. These are the elements which you'll see the recommendations coming forward later in the presentation. I'm not going to read all of those details, but that does recap for you the various elements of the program that we'll be discussing. So as I mentioned to you, we've had a Part 150 program since 1987. This is not new to CLT, but it has gone through several reiterations. In '96, the program was updated, and then again in 2015, our noise exposure maps were updated to reflect our newly added runway. Charlotte has invested more than $120 million in local community efforts that are related to the Part 150. That includes sound insulation of churches, schools, and homes, as well as property buyout, residential acquisition property. Residential property acquisition. Say that 10 times fast. So what was the timeline like for the project? Well, we started in January 2022 with this very body approving our contract with Landman Brown, who actually conducted the study on behalf of the airport. The middle of the chart here talks about numerous milestones for the program. Many of you are aware of that. We've updated you as we've gone through this. And then again, in October and November, thank you for your time, where we sat down and actually had small group briefings to bring you up to speed. We are here tonight in hopes that we will be on the December 9th agenda, at which time we will bring you a document for recommendation to the FAA. So community involvement, we've talked about that a lot. You know, there was a high level of community engagement, a high level of public contact. I'm not going to go through every one of these. You can read all of them, but we had stakeholder involvement. We had there we go, stakeholder involvement. We had general community involvement. We also had a public hearing where there was a court reporter who put things on the record for official comments. And in conjunction with that, we had a ton of public outreach, including social media, newspaper, dedicated website, dedicated emails. So, what are the key recommendations? There are 3 overarching themes: safety, efficiency, sustainability, and geographically balanced distribution of flights. Again, the 3 elements of the program: noise abatement measures, land compatibility use, and land use mitigation measures. So let's jump into the details of the recommendations, if I can drive it here. Okay, in the very beginning, we talked about noise exposure maps and what the Part 150 is. For those of you who are not familiar with it, this is our current noise exposure map. You can see the contour lines. I've had some people refer to this as the giant amoeba. That is actually a graphical depiction of what the noise looks like around the airport. So this is our current environment. The Part 150 program is designed to study the noise within those noise contours. So having that bit of background, let's go through the key measures. Updated measures, as you will see on the chart, are things that are carried from the previous program to the current program. The new things are new or changed. So I'm not going to comment on the updated items. They're minor. A lot of them are recognizing runway headings changes. They're very technical in nature, but in general, there's been no significant change. The new items, however, I will comment. On this one, on this particular slide, under noise abatement measures, we have the run-up policy. The run-up policy is a function of the airlines that operate in Charlotte, and it means they have a designated place where they test their engines and they run them up at capacity very loudly. So this is something that happens in various locations on the airport. It is noisy, and this policy dictates the time and the location which they can do that. The second change here is the new nighttime runway use, and what we are dealing with there is we have a runway that has come out of service, runway 523, and it is being decommissioned as part of the airfield expansion. As part of that, this study will look at how do we accommodate nighttime restrictions, where are the airplanes coming in, how is the airfield being used to minimize noise in our community. So let's go on to the second category, noise abatement measures. So there's a lot happening on this drawing, but what you can tell is in the purple, those are existing flight paths. So this plan is scheduled to implement new divergent headings for departures to disperse aircraft across a wider area, of course, pending environmental review by the FAA. What you're seeing in the blue is the proposed future flight paths. Now, this drawing was simulated or produced from simulations. It shows all future proposed headings. It is not intended for all of them to be used simultaneously. It was just done for this simulation purpose. Right now, we currently have 8. We have 8 headings, and you can track that if you were to count all the purple lines. There has been no significant change to our airspace modernization efforts since 1979. But yet, we have quadrupled our passengers in Charlotte and our airfield traffic. So this is a result of that, and this is something, of course, you will hear a lot more from. I will tell you that this is something that will have to be studied. This is a recommendation of the program. This cannot just be implemented. It will go through an environmental process with the FAA, as well as an additional public comment. And the last category is land use compatibility measures. Next to last category. And basically, this is updated. These have been in the plan. They've been updated to reflect the fact that we're going to continue in our community to recognize the real estate disclosure process, which is the airport noise disclosure overlay. It's been in place for many years, and this is a real estate process that requires the realtor to identify that the property you may be buying is located in the noise disclosure overlay. And there is a picture there of what property lies within the noise disclosure overlay, and that has not changed and will not change with the program. And lastly, we have our land use mitigation. I think public information is extremely important. This is a process that will continue. We must do this to advise our neighbors of what's happening and to help people understand what's happening in the community. We'll also continue our sound insulation efforts. As I mentioned to you earlier, we've invested $120 million in our community. That will continue through our voluntary acquisition program, as well as homes, schools, and churches that are eligible for sound insulation. So what's next? We intend to bring forward a council action to you on December 9th, at which time we will ask for your support in recommending this program to the FAA. The Part 150 has been in the works for 2.5 years. Once that happens, we will send it on, and then the FAA has 180 days to review the documents. As a result of that, we anticipate that it will take them 2 years to implement recommendations of the program. Because, as mentioned earlier, anything that changes the airspace, the way it is operated, will have to go through a environmental analysis, a public participation process, and then the FAA has to figure out how they're going to actually work those particular recommendations within their own organization. Here is a follow-up timeline for those of you who are interested in the details once it leaves your hands. These are projected timelines based on information that we have now. Clearly, the FAA may change course when it gets to them. We don't have any reason to believe that that would happen, but this is our projection based on the information we have from them at this point. So having said that, I tried to go through this quickly. I will tell you in anticipation of Monday evening that this is something that the FAA, specifically air traffic control, is extremely supportive of. This is also something that our hub carrier, American Airlines, is extremely supportive of. I think you will also hear from our Airport Community Roundtable, which is a group we meet with and work with routinely on how to mitigate aircraft noise in our community. I think you will also see that they are supportive of this effort. I'll be happy to take any questions you have at this point. I appreciate your attention.
All right, are there questions for anyone on the airport? Mr. Driggs?
Not so much a question. I just want to clarify the roundtable. I spoke to them today, and this group is important because they bring to us the message of people who might be affected by this. It works in conjunction with our other community outreach to give us an understanding of what the public response is. And what they explained to me was they are supportive. They did express some frustration with the cooperation that has existed between them and the airport. And I think that's something that we can talk about. But the key takeaway is that they, too, along with Rebic and a number of other parties, have sent us messages of support. I think it's important to note, you can imagine that when you see a picture like that, and you see those blue lines, the light blue lines going places where they weren't before, there are going to be people who aren't happy. So this is not an easy thing for us to do. And if you think about the Metroplex process that some of us were around for when this was done 6 years ago. So we're going to have to work through that. I can tell you that because of the critical contributions that the airport makes to Charlotte, we need to be prepared to minimize the impact on people and to achieve an outcome that does, as far as possible, reduce the noise. But we're going to have to accept the fact that some people may not like what we're doing. We got to do it. We just have to do it. The airport is such a critical driver for us, job creation, the economy, and we need to modernize the way the airport operates, achieve greater efficiencies. And so I personally, having spent quite a lot of time looking at these materials, will be supporting the action that is proposed to go ahead and submit to the FAA, understanding that after that comes the environmental review and there are other steps. But this is our moment to weigh in on the proposal. And again, my personal position is that we have to do this the best way we can, but end up supporting the airport. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. So it looks like we'll receive the presentation on the 9th and also vote on it as well?
To forward it to the appropriate federal authority.
All we intend,
I'm
go ahead,
sorry.
Mr. Manager.
Unless I'm mistaken, you're doing the presentation now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the presentation. So when does the public have an opportunity to speak on this?
If I could comment to that.
Okay.
The Part 150 has been a public process the entire time of the study. So if you'll go back to those community engagement slides, it will actually indicate for you how many times the public has been invited to participate in the process. I'm assuming because this is a business action that you could sign up and you could sign up to speak for or against on the 9th as part of the regular council process. But beyond that, until the FAA was to start investigating these, I don't see where there is an additional opportunity for the public to engage.
So I think you heard me just a few minutes ago talk about the public engagement and how members of the public do get overlooked somehow. So I don't know, and we've experienced this with the UDO and different large initiatives. So I'd like it clear. I want to hear from the public and how they feel. And Councilmember Brown, I know you're working very closely with the community. I don't know how many neighborhoods or how much construction this will require for these additional, what are they called? The runways, right? Are these runways or just, I don't know if there's going to be
Those are
additional
flight
runways.
paths.
If there's a map of what areas are going to be impacted, do we have that information? Will neighborhoods close to the airport, will they be, is there any demolishing going on? I mean, do we
No,
have
ma'am.
details about, so there's no?
Well, there's no demolishing.
Okay,
Let me clarify.
okay.
If you look at the drawing that is on the draft recommended noise abatement measures, those are simulated flight tracks. Those are not runways. That's in the air as the path that the aircraft takes.
Okay.
And to your point about has the community been engaged, I'll be happy, I think we've shared this in our small group meetings, but I'll be happy to email you all the documentation about who's been engaged, when they've been engaged.
So will there be additional runways that need to be built? I know these are the flight path simulations. Will there be additional construction, or is there?
Not as a
What
result
do I
of-
need to ask that we don't know? You know, so so there's no plan for expansion around the airport that would demolish any of the neighborhoods?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
We do have a new runway that is under construction now,
Uh-huh.
but it is being taken into consideration in this study and is part of why we are looking at the airspace analysis.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see a map where these areas are, if we could, if there's an actual map.
Okay. I'll follow up with you afterwards. There is,
Maybe not just for me, maybe for public consumption as well. If there's anything on the website where the public can see this
there's a lot of
information.
information on the website.
There's a lot of information, but I
Yes.
mean, in plain terms, where on the website can the public find
This
this?
particular drawing that is here is not on the website yet. We have not put it there yet because it was produced just in a week's time from a conversation we had last week with some of your peers. So
Where is there a map? So, because
This
people
is-
want to know how it affects them personally. So is there a map where someone can see their street and just know that they need to be paying more attention?
it's not done in that granular of detail at that point. This map that you have here with the district, you can't see on, here, let's go back. This map, it's difficult to see here, but there are council districts indicated on this map, and that is the closest we have to pinpointing where this is going to be, because this is a simulation that the FAA will study. So putting some of this information out in that format has not been something that the airport was doing or our consultants have done at this point.
Mr. Jones, do you understand my concern? We've gone through this with the UDO and different plans. When you talk about granular, that's the level that residents need to know the information. You know, it's not engineers speaking to engineers. This is the public that needs to know how this is going to impact them. We've lived through this with the UDO, you know, all the engagement and the games and the drive-throughs, and then we hear from our residents now who are opposed to, you know, the development because they didn't understand how it applied to them. We've gone through this, council. We understand how this impacts our residents, so we need to do better. So I appreciate your presentation, Ms. Gentry. You're doing what you're supposed to do. This is on us. So I say we need at least a map with street names or areas so that residents who live near the airport understand that there's going to be a change to noise abatement measures. If you're concerned, if it's going to impact you, we need to hear from you on Monday. I guess that's your opportunity.
Ms. Johnson, if I may, I would caution us from putting something out that is so specific that might not be accurate, because the FAA will make the determination about where these flight paths are. We did a simulation for exercise purposes only to give some sort of concept and/or inkling of what it would look like to go from 8 headings to 27. But that is not necessarily what the FAA will approve and/or implement in our community. So I think you could put yourself in a precarious position by doing something so specific at this point.
So what are you asking us to vote on?
We will send these measures, not the maps. Well, let me back up. The noise exposure map at the very beginning that shows the noise. We'll send this. We'll send the measures to the FAA. It is a requirement that your governing body, a federal requirement, that your governing body endorse your project. And we will send that to the FAA, and then they will start to study it. That this is what we think is our best option in our community for bringing forward an updated Part 150.
Thank you. Again, I think our public needs to have the information we have in terms that they can understand. So again, all of our decisions, there are people that are attached to them, and I'd like to see a map or something. You're asking us to vote. I'd like to know what the areas are that we're voting on, and I think the public should have access to that information as well. Thank you.
Jack, do you have something further about the map?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. Councilmember Johnson, this measure is the starting point. There will be another public process what the FAA will conduct if this measure is approved that will allow the community to comment on these headings that could be utilized in the future for diversion headings. So this is not the only opportunity that the community will have. There will be another with multiple opportunities for the public to comment in that process.
Thank you for that information, but one of the challenges that we're faced with is transparency. So we want to make sure we're giving all the information to the public sooner than later. At least I do. Thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman Brown.
Ms. Haley, thank you so much for your presentation. Wow, Councilmember Johnson, those are not foreign questions and statements that she's making. I've spent a great deal of time with you at the airport, and I understand the capacity. I've also sat in the small groups. Councilmember Johnson, did you get to sit in the small group? Did you take advantage of that? Oh, okay, you don't remember? Did I? So if you don't remember, that means that you didn't go? Virtually? No, it was in person.
Oh, no, I didn't go.
Okay, so there was a great deal of information that they submitted out in detail and allowed you, kind of small settings, allowed you to ask one-on-one. I don't oppose anything that you're saying. I'm just saying, for all of the relevant questions that you had, they presented those in the small group settings, the information, the data, everything that you're asking, still very valid. While we are on that topic, I got a message from a constituent that said, the Andos, we are very alarmed that the current airport noise disclosure overlay district is changing to reflect the current noise levels or future noise projections.
It's not changing.
We are concerned that the proposed use of the larger, outdated 1996 boundaries will allow the airport to designate a greater swath of land as incompatible for residential use. This is from our legal team, and so I guess they're concerned about the overlay of the map around the other area
Councilwoman.
project. Can you explain that? Because
Yes,
I know
ma'am.
that I was in
There is no change to the boundaries of that ANDO document.
Okay.
We are going to continue to use the old boundaries. This is a clarification in the program and says we will still use it in our community, but there is no change.
Well, so it was very beneficial for me, for the record, and for everybody listening, looking on YouTube, tuned in to our city council meeting. Very, very useful for me to be in the meeting, to ask my questions, to understand the community piece of it, because community had a lot of concerns about transparency. I asked those tough questions. You answered those, you and your team. If there's still something out there open and someone wants to know, I would like for them to email me so I could send that information to you as you and I are working through what is, yes, is the #1 economic driver for our city, but we also want to make sure that community is engaged. You shared the information from the community perspective. I asked you about SEIU and the union, about neighborhoods, people around. So those groups were very beneficial. If we could have the time to attend them, I know sometimes our schedules prevent us from doing so. If there's something that you would like for me to get for you, Councilmember Johnson, I'll be more than happy to do that. My questions were answered in the meeting. And so if there's anything unanswered, I would like for, it to be addressed for you, because you are a part of this body and you do care about the concern and the transparency of the community, just like I do, so.
Yeah, absolutely. My issue is for the public. It's not just my questions. I want to make sure there's public engagement, the information is transparent, so individuals can see how that applies to them. This is what happened with the UDO. It's very, very high level. When you talk about granular or getting into the weeds, the residents want to understand it at that level. So that's my concern.
Councilwoman Johnson, if I may, we do have a group called the Airport Community Roundtable, and that is a group that we meet with routinely, and they do represent our community. There are people who live in the highest noise zones, and there are people who live north of the city, and some into the edge of South Carolina. So this is an ongoing group that represents the community all the time in our conversations, not just when there's a Part 150. In the Part 150 process, they were actually on our stakeholder technical committee, and they have worked very closely with us through this process. In addition to that, we've had 3 community meetings, which are 2 days at a time when we have them. And then we also had a public hearing, and the public hearing has community commentary. And we had great participation at those meetings, people who were really interested. So I do feel confident about telling you that we've had a thorough public participation process, and would be happy to share more documentation with you offline if interested.
All right, Mr. Jones? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, my mic was off. Madam Mayor, may I speak?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so I'm dialoguing with my Councilmember Johnson and Ms. Haley from the airport. So Councilmember Johnson, when I say me, I mean my seat, which belongs to the constituents. When I say I mean I attended representing for the people. So you and I are on the same page once again. With the information that has been received and transpired, I communicated to community leaders. I don't have any opposition. If there is any of my colleagues that have opposition, because this has been going on for quite some time, for a very, very long period of time, and for the information that I dug into, for the answers that I asked, for the years of the studies and the mechanism that it take for this to get off the ground, just the Part 150 I'm speaking of, and for the information that has been presented, I'm saying your questions can be answered had you attended the roundtable.
No. So we have a letter from SEIU. It's in our email right now, and they're asking for weekends and different times of the night when working folks can attend the meetings. So again, this is just one letter I opened right now. We've lived through the UDO process, and I understand what you're saying, but I also represent citizens who didn't get the engagement they needed. So I understand you've done a lot, but here's one example, and I'm sure we'll get more after this discussion. I just want to make sure that the public can understand it. And when you look at this map, it's not very clear on who's going to be impacted by this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So, Councilmember Johnson, I understand what you're saying, and if there's anything that we can do as a staff, as a team, to look at the way we engage, we're open to that. I am extremely supportive of what Haley has been doing over the last couple of years in terms of getting us to this point today. But I wanted to make sure that I support, one, what the team has been doing, but also I understand your concerns and very open to other alternative methods of engaging with our community.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a difficult one, and I'll just lay it out like this. On the plus side, it seems with the detail we've been given, this is a no-brainer for our airport, for our tower controllers, for our carriers, for a variety of reasons. I think that's almost undisputable. I'd be shocked at some point if we found out that was not the case. I think on the con side, which again, I agree with some of the comments made, I mean, that really falls more squarely in our lap than anyone else's as a responsibility. I have, in my 7 years on this body, never experienced the level of passionate outcry that I experienced when the FAA rolled out the Metroplex stuff that changed routes and noise patterns almost in the same kind of approach that we're seeing here. I mean, it was substantial. It was most directly impacting my district, and I was out there hearing firsthand how they felt. So that's the thing we have to balance. And, you know, I think the unfortunate part of this is, you know, there's a week to basically do anything that hasn't been done. I know a ton of work has been done up into this point, but I sat in front of a neighborhood meeting 2 weeks ago, and there was probably 70 people in it, and I brought this up, and I said, how many of you have heard of this? Obviously, nobody had heard of it in that room. You know, so I gave them the website, and I said, you guys should get up to speed because, and I think this is the punchline, that while there are many steps to come, and it will take many years to bring this to fruition, there's only one shot that this council is going to have at it. And when it gets into the FAA's hands, I will tell you firsthand, the FAA was absolutely no help to me in those community meetings during Metroplex. They wouldn't engage. I had no, in fact, the only saving grace was the fact that why I didn't get murdered was that I said I had nothing to do with this. The council had nothing to do with this. So now we're at this unique spot where the council does have something to do with this. Doesn't mean even if we were to say no, that it can't go forward. And I'm not trying to discount. I know it's critically important to the airport, and we have to balance these things out. But I really, I mean, there's a week. I would love to see, you know, a dedicated spot of a public hearing, even if it's on the same day of, where neighbors could have a chance to voice their concerns or support. I would love there to be some kind of outreach process to neighborhood associations and folks. And I understand why people may be hesitant to kick that hornet's nest, but there's only one chance to hear that. And unfortunately, I think what the case is even if we do that, it will be like the UDO. But it will be like the UDO where we screamed about it, talked about it for 2 years straight. No one fully understood until stuff started happening different next door to them. And then all of a sudden, that's when the backlash is going to come, and there's going to be no and we're just going to be, once again, I'm sorry, there's nothing we could do, and I'm sorry you weren't paying attention in the week that it was public for the general population. So if you're looking for the simple answer of what this is going to do, as far as I understand it, it's not going to demolish neighborhoods, it's not going to change the configuration of the airport, but it's going to drastically change where airplanes fly over in this community to places that haven't had it before. It may benefit some that are getting a bulk of it now, but the punchline is if they ask, you cannot there's nothing we can tell them. You can tell them predictions and models of where it could go, but you can't say that, well, it's going to be less here or more here, because we simply don't know at this point, which is part of the catch-22. So as someone where those new blue lines go over a distinct and large portion of my district that didn't get it before, and I have experienced my district firsthand, I'm very hesitant in my approach to this. I understand the other side of this coin, and I don't want to, gum up the works. But, Mr. Manager, if there's some way that we can do a little more with the general population of neighborhoods so they're aware and they have a chance to talk to us, I mean, to me, that would be the only way that I could even humor supporting something like this at this point, if I knew that in the last push, we made a big effort to make sure we heard their voices. Because right now, I think there's a very small percentage of people that are on the inside baseball portion of this that have had their voices heard, and many of them do represent communities. I'm not trying to say they don't, but there's a difference when someone's like, oh, what's that noise over my house? And I never had that before. And I've seen that anger firsthand. So again, I'm trying to be as balanced as I can to say this is not a no-brainer either way, but there is some truth to the aspects of making sure the community had a chance to voice their opinions, because we only get one shot at this as a council, and then it's out of our hands for the rest of the process.
Mr. Bakari, Mr. Driggs?
So I'm interested in your comments. I'm glad you're still alive, for one thing. But I'm interested in your comments because 2040 plan, I-77 North, it is really difficult to get a large number of people to participate and take an interest before, right? They see it coming. And then you go, well, we tried. So I don't know whether there's anything that we could have done that we didn't do in order to get the message out on a large scale. But I just know experience has shown that over and over again, we've tried, and then we got the backlash when everybody saw the outcome of the decision rather than during the making of the decision.
I'd like to ask, could I have a moment? So I just wondered, I remember when we did this on the west side of town, and all of the planes landed there, and this was a big deal because it was trying to make sure that there was an ability for them to be included. But I was wondering, how many times have we had to do this in the lifetime of the airport? How many times have we had to submit these documents? Does anybody recall that?
We've only had
Because-
2 updates to our
We've
Portland.
done 2 major updates.
Two
but we've
major
updated
updates.
The maps
And
numerous
I
times.
remember.
But the flight paths have not had a significant change since
Right.
the program started in 1979.
Right, so this has been something that has helped us create a great economic engine. At the same time, there is sacrifice with it. And I think that Mr. Bakari described it well. The group that I sat on with, they were at the coffee shop every day talking about how do we do something differently. At the end of the day, if you talk about a lot of this, people have come to say, well, there is a way that you have to look at this to say, what are we trying to do to achieve? And we are trying to give people more information about it. My suggestion, Haley, would be, you've got an airport advisory committee group that's working at this. They understand it, they know it. And to Mr. Bakari's point, if there are people that really need to understand this, they will not hear it from us as well as they would hear it from those folks that are already engaged and have worked in the process and I think have the ability to do it. The time that we did this, the last one that I was involved in, it was hard. But at the end of the day, the neighborhoods were able to work through, this is where we would go and what we would do. And some of this is just going to be growing pains for everyone, but I think that it's a good idea to have people that are citizens in this community be able to talk to citizens in the community. And I think that includes the council members. Ms. Brown, you're out there all the time, you get a lot of information, and you're in a newly district, you're in a district that's fast growing. A lot of these things have taken place, and they went through that same process, and they just had good leadership and good information to be able to accomplish it. So I think that Mr. Jones has asked and said, as well as Mr. Bakari, let's figure out a way to get some information that's easily accessible.
If I may
And
make
let's do that for the admission of what we're doing. But again, we have this plan that has to go to the FAA. And I would like to say, what are the consequences that we would have if we could move more quickly to get education out or processes out? I mean, you can do a lot of that in, I think, the time that we have.
If I may
So with
comment
that-
to that, Mayor.
Uh-huh.
The Part 150, if you'll go back to slide 2, the Part 150 is only addressing the area within the noise contour map.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is beyond the noise contour map. So the areas that would receive overflights, we did not go there. We ran a simulation based on the exercise of the additional gateways. But we did not go there because that is exactly what will happen when the FAA launches their process. We will go through a series of public meetings, a series of public input and opportunities. But that was not part of this study.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Mr. Brown?
Oh, yeah. So I have to come back because it's my district and, you know, I get one vote, even though I have to go out there and take all the hits and do all the work and show up for SEIU and all of the community gatherings. So I would like to say that we are in this position, and Councilmember Johnson feels the way that she feels because of transparency, because we're always feeling rushed, that there's not enough information. I understand that maybe the Part 150, the community team did their due diligence, but if we go back to our community meetings on how we're getting information out to our constituents, when I get a community meeting when we're getting ready to do rezoning and there's 0 on there, it's so concerning to me. So I would challenge us to, at the beginning of the year, as we strategize and we go into our strategy meeting, how can we, the same way we lobby for people to vote for us, and we knock on doors and send out whatever we're sending, people get the message then. We have really got to make sure that the message is out there. Our reputation has been tarnished on transparency. So that's why there's a lot of pushback when it comes to the area of the airport and transparency and what we need to do. But that's why I, as a district rep for the people, elected for the people, by the people, that's why I go out, meet with the airport. That's why I've took it upon myself to build a relationship with Haley and her airport staff. So it's one dash of transparency, where I'm weighing in for the community, for the people that chose me to be in this seat, and they know I'm fair, and they know I fight. And so with the information that you presented to me, Haley, hearing my colleagues, because they're very important, I stand with supporting because of the information and how I dug deep. I also don't want to excuse the fact that there are some very valuable questions and concerns out there. So what are we going to do with just 7 days left? We're always in a situation where there's always just 7 days, or we got 2 days, or we got to make a decision. I brought that up to Mr. Heath in our meeting earlier today, that there's just not enough time for anything in life when we're getting ready to come to our council meetings. When you look up, it's time to be here. So what are we going to do, and how are we going to do strategically and be intentional when we move forward in trying to make sure that our community is informed, our constituents, the folks that put us in these seats, are informed about our decisions and what, because I've done my part. And the people that put me in the seat know that I fight for them hard every single day. And I'm not going to stop fighting for them until I'm here, while I'm here in my 2 years. But it's important because transparency has been a big concern around issues with the airport. I hear it all the time about what we're going to do. And that's why I took the initiative and the desire, whether I want to or not, I'm showing up, I'm being there, I'm engaged, I'm committed. I'm going to SEI meetings, I'm taking the emails, I'm taking the text messages. So what are we going to do? We have a week left. I'm asking, what are we going to do? We know that we send out information. we go to community meetings, there's one person showing up, there's 3 people showing up. What are we gonna do? I'm listening. I'm all ears. I yield to my colleagues.
Brian, I think that we've been asked by the airport to approve this after having it on the next council meeting, and to understand what I believe has been discussed is how do we do this and provide for additional information about it as we are moving forward. So how do we create more opportunities? And I think that's something that is really going to require the council's participation, because it's what you said. It's like the people that you want to be able to talk with and explain. And I think it's best when council members understand that and participate with the community. So with that, I know that this has been, yes? Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. Thank you. So one of the things that was mentioned is a public hearing on this next week. You also mentioned, Mayor, there's been, I guess, twice, we've had some major changes. I don't know if the last one was in 1979.
Oh, I'm talking about when actually there was an airline called Eastern, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, so we didn't have Twitter. We didn't have Twitter or Nextdoor or Facebook or internet or the interweb or any of that stuff there. So, yeah, so I will wait for Ms. Haley.
Things at the time.
Ms. Gentry, and we can, or no, Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, if we could, I don't know if there's a website where, because I'm sure this will be on the news, is there a website where people can get more information between now and the 9th? I also think that this map, I don't know how long this has been public, but I can look at this and I can see part of my district, but I don't know what streets this is going to impact. I think we need something on a more granular level so people can really see that the traffic patterns are going to change and have the opportunity to speak out. Another thing, again, we could have a public hearing on the 9th. We could do some social media outreach. And again, this map needs to be more clear on what areas are impacted. You're right, Mr. Bakari. It looks like District 6 is really impacted. Yeah. In all of our districts. District 4 is going to have some additional traffic patterns. So this needs to be more clear. This is not even clear to us as far as what areas this is on the map. So I think we need to be intentional and deliberate about being transparent in this process and get this information out this week. Thank you. We have the technology.
Okay. Ms. Brown?
Oh, yeah, Ms. Brown got a lot to say. Definitely have a lot to say. So as far as this map, no, we can't see that. That's why, as council members, when we're elected, we are given opportunities to show up to these small sessions, these small groups. And I challenge us, if there's not an emergency or something going on, or if those opportunities, this is the opportunity to bring all this to the table, Councilmember Johnson. You and I fight for the same thing. I would have to tell you that, yeah, what you're saying, I'm not saying what you're saying is not correct, but you had the opportunity to get all your information for District 4. You and I have a rhetoric. I'm saying, did you show up? Because you're asking about a map.
Don't do that, please.
No, don't tell me what not to do.
You've missed more meetings than I have in 5 years.
It doesn't matter.
So don't talk to me about if I wasn't at a small group
I'm talking
meeting.
to you about this because you're so passionate about something that's in my district that I show up for. And I never disrespect you. So you're upset and you're in your feelings. But you don't want me to go there. It's not professional what you just did to me. I didn't do that to you. You did it to me. I did not. I said this is an opportunity to go to meetings, but always a hurt dog will holler, and you just did that. You just did that. So you did it to yourself. So I'm the wrong person to do that with, okay? I think you know my background. Again, going back and being professional, because I'm very professional, and I treat everybody in here with the highest level of dignity and respect, but you get what you give. On this report right here, like I said, there was an opportunity to show up. I have been going out to the airport. There is nobody that can reach out to SEIU. They will tell you that I show up more than anybody that sit at this dais. I'm going to take the heat for this because I go out and I show up. You said 5 years. I've only been here for 11 months. I can't show up for 5 years, but I've been voting since 1989. Okay. Thank you. I yield to the council.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I'd just like to there's no, I just want to clarify one thing from my comment, just in case it creates extra work, which is not my objective. It is it is that I threw out the public hearing and things like that as a last-ditch hope to figure out a way that I can get from my current position to a yes vote. I'm not at all confident that that is achievable inside a week, and even if it was, with all the detailed information you have to get, we had the UDO debates for 2 years, and people still weren't basically paying attention until after the stuff started happening. So, of course, I'm looking for a way to get from my current position to be able to support this in a week. If there's some magic bullet in there, I'm certainly open to it, but I don't want to give the impression that I want to create a whole bunch of new work between now and then. I will say, though, the crux of my issue isn't that I think there's some magical bullet that's going to give me the community feedback that will give me cover to make a decision. I think the problem is it's a simple two-part question that people have to answer. For people all across Charlotte, do you value our airport and its growth and want us to invest in the things necessary to make it future successful? I think most people would say yes to that. But then when you look at my district and you say, I'm going to make the number up, but it's probably directionally correct, for the 50% additional people that didn't have the problem before this, but will have airplanes at some level flying over their house now, are you okay with that, right?
I'm okay with it.
Well, I appreciate that, Mayor, but you are not, I didn't see you in any of those town halls screaming at me.
No, I wasn't in the Metroplex. I just have the Lufthansa
But
flight.
the point is, no, people aren't going to activate in a way in a week or even a month or a year and actually tell us that. But we have to, and sometimes, stand up and say, I'm going to make a decision for you based on how I think it's going to come and turn out in the end. I think this is one of those scenarios. So I'm looking for a way to get past that issue that I have right now. But I just wanted to clarify, I don't want a whole bunch of extra work because I'm not confident that anything could be achieved there.
Okay. So we have until December the 9th. This will be on our agenda for December the 9th. And Mr. Driggs and then Ms. Brown again. Mr. Driggs?
I just wanted to say, for one, I don't think that not accommodating the growth of the airport in the city by making some of these changes is an option, all right? And therefore, we're going to have to grapple with this question of having a whole bunch of policy reasons for making a decision and accepting the fact that inevitably there will be people who don't like it. And our task is to improve the ratio of the benefits to the costs, but we are not going to achieve an outcome hoping not to have any cost. There will be people who are affected and who won't like it. That won't change if we give ourselves another month. And that's why when I discussed this, if you remember, Ms. Gentry, in the beginning, we got deep into the weeds. There was the website, and I said, you know what? For us here, the real issue is dealing with the public's reaction to a change in the noise patterns. I don't think there's going to be a huge debate on this group about whether or not, from the airport standpoint, this is an essential, or whether or not the airport is an important resource to us. What we're dealing with is public opinion in our respective districts. I sit out on my deck in Ballantyne, and I hear planes. It's not really loud, but I hear them. So I'm hoping that in the coming week, we can be as responsive as possible to the suggestions that have been made, try to raise the profile of awareness, take steps to do that. But also, I would like to try to gather in the course of the coming week what the mix is of sentiment on this body, because I know there is a mix of opinion, and it's to be expected that we will not achieve unanimity because of what I just said. There are going to be people who are unhappy. So the question is it going to be possible to pass something on the 9th? Mm-hmm. And I personally am prepared to keep working on it and try to achieve more clarity around that. I hope you will think of ways that we can respond to the notice, like do we issue a press release? Do we kind of get the word out to people that this action is being contemplated so that no one come back later and say, hey, I didn't have any idea that was happening. Anyway, that's my position. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. Brown, you're our last speaker.
Thank you,
and
Mr.
then we'll
Driggs.
move
There's
back.
always going to be someone that say they don't know anything is happening. I mean, you got to understand, even with this election, these results, look at how many people, I'm just being honest, look at the results that we had of the election. So clearly, there's always going to be something that people disagree with or don't want to happen. But what I would like to see as a district rep, for someone that has one vote on this council, for all the work that I put in for us to move forward with transparency, to be able to show our constituents that we do care about them, that we're not just siding with the airport. Anybody know that I'm not just siding with anybody. I don't go along to get along, okay? I make good trouble and sometimes bad trouble, depending on who you're asking, okay? But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I want to do the best job that I can possibly do for my constituents. I know that I've been doing that. I've learned a lot in my 11 months, and there's still a whole lot more to learn. But what I came here with was representing the people. What I swore in with was representing the people. That ain't changed. So again, I made it my business to build a relationship with airport staff because there was some transparency concerns there. And so that's my job for District 3. The airport is in my district. There are all types of constructions, hills, mud, dirt. I travel through it every day. Airport, the sounds, all of that stuff is around my house. This city is growing. I'm not going to be here forever. So moving forward with transparency, what are we going to do so that our constituents know that we care about them and that we're not siding with anybody? Because I didn't take the seat to side with anybody except for the people that put me in the seat. So I would like to see what we're going to do within the next week. I heard Bakari say that it's impossible. Nothing is impossible. So we need to put something out there to show our efforts that we care about the people.
Okay, thank you. All right, I believe everyone has had at least once or twice to speak on it, those that were recognized.
I think I had a little bit more, but
I.
I earned that.
Yes, you did. Thank you. All right, so, Mr. Jones?
That's all we have.
That's it for tonight. So do we have a motion to adjourn? All right, all in favor? Yay. That's what it is. Thank you guys very much for the attention to the committee.